When researchers reached out to salespeople and asked them what's the most common reason they lost sales during the last 12 months, do you know what the number one reason was? That's right, it's price. It's been the same number one reason for the last 4 decades and 5 recessions. Now, when those same researchers followed up and they went back to the customers that the salespeople lost the sale from, and they asked them, why did you choose one vendor over another? Guess what? Price dropped to number 4. You see, now that our economy is really picking up steam, this gap's getting even wider. Most of the preliminary research this year shows that price is going to come in at number 5. Corporate buyers have always cited value as the number one reason they purchased. But value is a bit fuzzy, and we went back to the buyers to say, well, tell us what you mean by value. The top response had nothing to do with price. B2B buyers tell us what they value most is the relationship they have with the salesperson and the company that salesperson works for. In fact, just the anticipation of working with a salesperson that appears to be trustworthy can attract new business to you. Now, let me give you an example. In a recent study, the Rocky Mountain Marketing Association asked B2B buyers to come to a research center. They had set up several companies selling the exact same product, but at very different price points. They spent the whole day being pitched by those 5 companies. When each of the B2B buyers had met with the 5 suppliers, they brought them into a room to determine why did they select one salesperson versus another. Not one of the B2B buyers selected the salesperson that had the lowest price, and they were selling the exact same product. So when we asked them, well, why did you select the salesperson you did? They said, we picked the person we felt we could have the best business relationship. Trust kept coming up. In fact, 87% said the person I selected clearly demonstrated to me the difference that they would bring and their team would bring along with the product versus the competition. This same research tells us that emphasizing that there's a veteran support team back at your office is very, very important to B2B clients. It's what differentiates you from those lowball price competitors we run into on the internet all the time. One industry that does a great job of delivering on this strategy is the New Orleans restaurants. When you go out to dinner in New Orleans, the host or hostess, before they seat you at your table, take you through the kitchen. You get to see the chef and the sous chefs preparing your meals. You get to see the garnishes and the decorations going on in the food staging areas. You get to see the wine steward, the waiters, the waitresses, the bus people running around. Before you sit at your table, you realize that there's an entire team working on your behalf. And when that check hits your table later that night, you don't mind because you know this is one business that brought together an entire team to work on your behalf, and it was worth it. And by the way, that's where the term selling the sizzle comes from.
In her bestseller, Selling to Big Companies, Jill Conrath wrote, one of the biggest reasons salespeople struggle in today's market is because they're weak at selling value. Their failure to articulate the value of their company. It's their downfall. Instead, they limp along trying to drive sales by competing on price. Selling what the client values and not just leading with the discount means you're focusing on the hot buttons that your buyer values the most. Now that's why I recommend you begin to try and understand all you can about your client's business, how they make money, what your client's personal business goals are. This is going to help you immensely down the road. Competing over price, that's easy. Anyone can do it. But value, selling value, now that's hard. To be effective, you got to know what value is to each individual client. And the easiest and most effective way to determine what your client values is the most unpopular of salespeople, and that's you just simply ask them. Jill goes on to say that most people are scared to ask their customers about value. She says, it took me a while to get up the guts to do it. I had no idea that the certain little things I threw in at no charge were extremely valuable to customers. Not only did these discussions change my value proposition, but they also changed my offering and my own self-perception. So here's my advice to you. Start out easy. I want you to pick 3 clients you've got a nice relationship with. Invite them to lunch or coffee. As soon as you guys get down and get comfortable, I want you to say that your team's primary focus this year is to really deliver the services that your clients value the most. So then ask your client, can you share with me which of our services or benefits you value the most? Now sit back and take notes. You're going to be pleasantly surprised how impressed your client is that you even asked the question. Now next, this one's important. Ask, is there a service or benefit one of our competitors offers that you'd wish we did or did better? Now this is a hard part because it's going to be very easy to become defensive. So just take notes. Don't get defensive or offer any excuses. Just take notes and trust me, you've already scored big points by just asking the question.
Now, each time a client shares one of their favorite benefits or one of your competitors, I want you to ask a follow-up question. Even if you think you may know the answer, I want you to ask them to share with you how this is of value to them. Or another way to phrase this is, what problems does this service or benefit provide for you? Now, the reason you're asking this question is to remind them why it's so valuable to do business with a company like yours. But secondarily, it's giving you a great insight into why they buy. It's also going to provide you with some exceptional stories that you can use when you're talking to new prospects down the road. Let's take a moment to discuss why stories are so important in selling value. Let's look at a recent study conducted by Notre Dame. What they've proven to us is that our mind is not hardwired to retain facts. In less than 1 hour, 55% of what we've heard evaporates. We forget. By the end of the day, it's up to 62%, and by the end of a month, it's 80%. Regardless of all the hard work and effort and beautiful pictures you put in that presentation, it's going to go right up in smoke. Your client deals with a flood of information every day. As a result, make an impression on a client, one that cuts through the day's distractions, is not easy. Stories are called the sticky notes for the memory. Facts are 20 times more likely to be remembered if they are part of a story. Stories are a wonderful way to make you leverage value by making the information that's important to your client stay with your client. Researchers have observed that when a salesperson tells a story, well, the client puts their pens and paper down. Their posture becomes relaxed. They begin to listen. And that's how we begin to really sell value. And to successfully sell value, you must know how your client defines success. We need to understand how their business makes money and how they personally are successful. For most businesses, it's revenue and net profits. Your job is to determine what success is to each individual client and then clearly communicate that you and everyone back at the office that supports you, plus the preferred suppliers that you deal with, are all at your client's disposal. Having stories about how you've helped past companies allows you to leverage the halo effect. Mr. Marriott used to remind us that with the exception of venture capitalists, no one really wants to be a pioneer. What he meant by this was sales prospects are going to place a much greater value on solutions that have helped other companies or brands that they know and admire than something new out of the box. By sharing these stories that your current clients have given you, you are in fact leveraging the halo effect. The halo effect makes you more valuable and less risky in the eyes of your prospects. Did you know that citing a well-known client can also help you deflect price objections? Let me give you an example. Let's say a client says to you, if you don't lower your price, or something like give me free shipping, I'm not sure we can proceed. Your answer could be, I know exactly what you mean. You know, we've helped both United Airlines and Coca-Cola with a very similar challenge. Would you like to hear how they solved it? Well, to start off with, your client's going to be intrigued that the marketing titans at Coke and United are struggling with the same issues they are. Better yet, you leverage the halo effect to change the conversation. You're no longer talking just about price. What you are talking about is your behind-the-scenes insight into two well-known brands and how they overcame a challenge. Another great tactic to promote value is to introduce risk. Nothing amplifies your value more than helping your buyer sense risk in dealing with a competitor. Risk is the great equalizer between value and the desire for low prices. IBM used this technique flawlessly for years. They would remind any customer that raised a price objection that no one ever got fired for selecting IBM. This year, the internet has turned many of the products you sell into commodities. The most effective way for you to differentiate your company from lowball online providers is to promote the value and the service you provide. Now write this one down. If the client has not considered the inherent risk of going with a low-price competitor, it's your job to professionally introduce it. By professionally, I mean framing it as a sincere concern for your customer's success, not knocking the competition. You need to proactively educate your clients to the services that make working with you so valuable and the risk of going with a company that doesn't provide that kind of value. Each and every one of us has gone into a meeting where we know the client's got a price from a low-ball competitor. A lot of times we go into these meetings just as a courtesy. Next time I want you to try this tactic. I want you to write down on a piece of paper the 3 to 4 things that could go wrong if your client does indeed go with an unproven low-price competitor. Now before you leave, I want you to type these onto a piece of paper in a big, bold font. Now underneath that, I want you to put your name and your phone number. Then I want you to handwrite with a big star next to your phone number, okay to call me at home or on the weekends. Now take this with you. And the last thing you do when you leave the meeting with the client is hand them that piece of paper and say, many of my clients have had to go with an unproven low bidder due to budget constraints. It's okay. It's part of business. My experience is that these are the 4 most common things that can go wrong. If any of these happen to you, please call me. I'll do everything I can to help you. You can call me after hours or on weekends. Now smile, because 57% of the time when you get back to your office, that client will call you because they've had time to reflect on the risk of going with a lowball provider. Now earlier I suggested that you meet with your top accounts and get a list of the 4 services that they value the most, the things that are the most important for them when they do business with you. Because the next time one of these buyers comes back to you and says that you've got to cut a price to get a specific piece of business, I want you to retrieve that list. And I want you to put it on a piece of paper and hand it to them or email it to them and say the following. We've previously discussed how these vital 4 services are of benefit to you. Which 3 would you like me to eliminate first so we can try to get closer to the price you want? I want you to think for a moment the most common things your clients ask you to give to them for free. Something like shipping or possibly free samples. Well, from this day forward, no more free. I want you to make a good sound judgment on what those services would cost that client. So let's say it's shipping. If you're giving them shipping for free and otherwise would cost $47, when it's time to close the deal and agree on a price, I want you to type on your invoice or contract or email, shipping, $47. And then I want you to go back and take a pen and cross out 47 and write in no charge and your initials. 2 things. It tremendously emphasizes to the client the value of doing business with you. And it also eliminates the concern that they possibly don't realize how valuable these services are. So you're both negotiating and educating. The sales board has reported that only 1 in 5 salespeople are effectively selling value when a client raises a price objection. Every time a salesperson unnecessarily gives in, they're teaching their customer to continue asking for discounts, even if they believe the original price was fair. In fact, studies have shown that 40% of all customers who ask for a price reduction actually believe the original price was fair. You see, the 40%, well, they're just checking to ensure they got the best deal or because they went to a negotiating seminar and learned to always ask twice for a discount. Now, what happens if the customer asks for a discount because a competitor has offered the exact same product at a lower price? Well, the sales board reports that 70% of us, well, we just drop our price. There's no attempt to sell value, to service, or to defend our pricing. 60% of all discounts offered last year were done so without the client requesting one. Just imagine the net profits we left on the table because we didn't sell value when price objections were introduced. Now let me share with you a very negative effect discounting has on gross margins. Let's say you've got a product and it's priced at a 30% gross margin level. After some tough negotiating by the client, you give in a little bit and offer a 10% discount. Let me ask you a question. How much more product will you now have to sell to get back to that full gross margin dollar amount? Well, if you hadn't dropped the price by 10%, you'd be okay. But if you had dropped the price by 10%, you'd have to sell 50% more product to get back to that gross profit level. So please remind yourself that your customers are honestly telling researchers that price is number 4. In fact, they're saying it might be slipping to number 5 this year. Never forget the impact on your personal success when you begin to professionally and politely defend net profits by selling value before dropping price. When you do this, it's going to have a tremendous impact on your future sales success.